Left with nothing by her husband, she surprises him by showing up at her father-in-law's will reading. The rain poured relentlessly, hammering against the windshield of Mia's aging Honda as she pulled up across the street from a mansion she once thought would always welcome her. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, trembling, not from the cold but from the storm brewing inside her. This wasn't just a house, it was a fortress of memories, both good and cruel, standing tall with its grand stone arches and iron gates. To Mia, it loomed more like a monument to the life she'd been forced to leave behind. 2 years had passed since Liam walked out on her, leaving her shattered and scraping by. Back then, she'd believed in him, in their vows, in the forever they'd promised each other. Liam wasn't just handsome, he was magnetic, the kind of guy who lit up every room he walked into. And his family. The Walkers were practically royalty in their city. Wealthy, powerful, and intimidatingly polished. For a girl like Mia, a public school teacher with a modest background, marrying into their world felt like a dream come true. But the dream quickly turned into a nightmare. Liam's charm masked a selfishness so deep that Mia never saw it coming until it was too late. He wanted someone to parade around like a trophy, not a partner. When he announced he was leaving her for a younger, glamorous influencer named Chloe, it wasn't just the betrayal that cut Mia down. It was the calculated way Liam and his family had worked together to ensure she walked away with nothing. No home, no money. Just a suitcase and the clothes on her back. Life after Liam was a grind. Mia moved into a cramped studio apartment, picking up extra shifts at school and tutoring on weekends just to keep the lights on. Nights were spent grading papers at her tiny kitchen table, her stomach empty because groceries were a luxury. Yet somehow she refused to break. Every tear she cried hardened into resolve. And now, here she was, staring at the Walker estate through rain-smeared glass, an invitation to Mr. Victor Walker's will reading clutched in her hand. She hadn't been back here since the divorce, since the day she walked away with her dignity but little else. She almost hadn't opened the envelope when it arrived last week, thinking it was some cruel prank. But curiosity had won out, and the words inside left her speechless. You are requested to attend the reading of Victor Walker's will. Mia's heart pounded as she turned off the engine and gathered her courage. She wasn't just walking into a mansion. She was walking into the lion's den, a room full of people who had cast her aside like trash. As she stepped out of the car and into the rain, she wasn't sure whether this was the boldest decision of her life, or the most foolish. Mia hesitated at the gate, her umbrella trembling in her hand as the rain poured down in sheets. The mansion loomed ahead, its grandeur untouched by time, while her own life felt like it had aged decades since she'd last been there. This wasn't just any house, it was the Walker family's sanctuary. For years, it had been the backdrop to fancy dinners, lavish parties, and whispered conversations where Mia was never quite welcome. Now, she was here as an outsider. It had been 2 years since Liam shattered her life. Their marriage had started with so much promise. She truly believed Liam was her fairy tale. Handsome, successful, and utterly captivating. But beneath the charm lay a man who craved power and status, someone for whom love was just another transaction. For the Walkers, Mia was never more than an inconvenience. A schoolteacher from a working-class family didn't belong in their gilded world, no matter how much she loved Liam. When Liam left her for Chloe, a glossy, Instagram-famous socialite, Mia had been blindsided. He didn't just leave, he erased her. The Walkers' lawyers made sure the divorce left her with nothing, and every attempt she made to fight back was met with icy precision. She'd lost her home, her financial stability, and the man she thought was her partner. But the worst part wasn't losing Liam, it was realizing how little she'd ever mattered to him or his family. Since then, life had been an uphill battle. Her tiny apartment was barely big enough to live in, let alone dream in. The nights were the hardest, sitting at her kitchen table grading papers with an empty fridge behind her. Yet every struggle made her stronger. She rebuilt herself piece by piece, vowing never to let anyone diminish her again. But this invitation to Victor Walker's will reading? It felt like a cruel joke. Victor, Liam's father, had always been an enigma. Stern, reserved, and impossible to read. He'd never been unkind to Mia, but he'd never stood up for her either. During family gatherings, he was the only Walker who didn't openly treat her like an interloper. Sometimes, Mia thought she caught a glimmer of something in his eyes, disapproval at Liam's arrogance, maybe even a flicker of sympathy for her. And now, after all this time, she was standing at his door. The butler opened it before she could knock, his face as unreadable as Victor's had been. "This way," he said curtly, not even asking why she was there. The scent of polished wood, fresh flowers, and expensive cologne hit her as she stepped inside, flooding her mind with memories she'd tried so hard to bury. The study where the will reading was set to take place was just as she remembered, opulent, intimidating, and steeped in tradition. As Mia stepped through the doorway, the room fell silent. Every pair of eyes turned to her, and she felt the weight of their judgment before anyone even spoke. Liam was there, of course, standing by the window with his arms slung casually around Chloe's shoulders. They looked every bit the power couple, him in his perfectly tailored suit, her in a sleek designer dress. For a moment, Mia felt the familiar sting of bitterness, but she quickly forced it down. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. "What are you doing here?" Liam's voice sliced through the tension, sharp and incredulous. He stepped forward, his perfect features twisted in disbelief. Mia held up the heavy envelope she'd received, her voice steady even though her pulse was racing. "I was invited." "Invited," Chloe echoed, her tone dripping with mockery. "This is a family matter. Surely there's been a mistake." Before Mia could respond, the lawyer cleared his throat. He was a composed man with silver hair and an air of authority that silenced the room. "Ms. Walker is here because she is named as a beneficiary in Victor Walker's will." The room erupted. Liam's face flushed crimson, his shock giving way to outrage. Chloe looked as though someone had slapped her. Around the room, whispers of disbelief spread like wildfire, their hushed tones only amplifying the chaos. Mia stood frozen, her outward calm hiding the storm inside her. Beneficiary? This had to be a mistake. Victor barely knew her. Why would he include her in his will? But as the lawyer opened a thick leather folder and began to read, it became clear that this was no accident. Victor had left Mia something significant, something that was about to turn the Walkers' world upside down. The lawyer's voice cut through the chaos like a knife. Before his passing, Mr. Victor Walker made several private amendments to his will. These changes were deliberate, witnessed, and documented. Mia Anderson is listed as a direct beneficiary. The room froze, the weight of his words hanging thick in the air. Liam's jaw dropped, his carefully constructed mask of control cracking into pure disbelief. Chloe let out a sharp laugh, though it sounded more like a gasp of desperation. "This is insane," she hissed, her perfectly manicured hand clutching Liam's arm. But the lawyer wasn't finished. Mr. Walker left detailed instructions to ensure his wishes were upheld. "This is legally binding." Liam stepped forward, his voice rising. "She has no claim to this family. This is a mistake. There's no way my father would leave her anything." His anger turned his face a deep shade of red, the calm and collected image he always projected now completely shattered. The lawyer didn't even flinch. "Your father disagreed," he said coolly, flipping a page in the leather-bound folder. "He made these amendments without the input of any family members." Mia stood rooted to the spot, her mind racing as she tried to process what she was hearing. She'd walked into this mansion expecting humiliation, maybe even mockery, but this? This was beyond anything she could have imagined. Victor had left her something, and judging by the growing fury in Liam's voice and the pale shock on Chloe's face, it wasn't a trinket or some token gesture. The lawyer continued reading, and the truth hit the room like a bombshell. Victor Walker hadn't just left Mia something. He'd left her everything that mattered. The vineyard. The crown jewel of the Walker Empire. Mia's legs felt like they might give out as the lawyer's words sank in. The vineyard wasn't just a family property. It was the property. A sprawling estate known for producing award-winning wines. It was the foundation of the Walker legacy and a key to their fortune. For years, Liam had bragged about how he'd inherit it someday. Now, that dream was ashes in his hands. This is outrageous, Liam bellowed, slamming his hand on the table. My father wouldn't do this. She has no idea how to manage something like that. The lawyer's gaze remained icy. Your father believed otherwise. If you wish to contest the will, you are welcome to do so in court. However, I should warn you that Mr. Walker was meticulous in his preparations. Any challenge is unlikely to succeed. The room buzzed with tension. Relatives whispered furiously among themselves, their eyes darting between Mia and the lawyer. It was clear that this revelation had thrown the entire Walker family into chaos. Liam, however, wasn't finished. This isn't over, he spat, turning his glare on Mia. You think you can just take what doesn't belong to you? Mia raised her chin, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. I didn't take anything, Liam. Your father made his decision. If you have a problem with it, take it up with him. The power in her words wasn't lost on anyone. For the first time in years, Mia felt like she had the upper hand. This wasn't just about an inheritance, it was about reclaiming her worth, standing tall in the face of the people who had cast her aside. As the will reading concluded, the room began to empty. The other Walkers avoided Mia's gaze as they left, muttering amongst themselves. Liam and Chloe were the last to go, their departure marked by slamming doors and muffled curses. Left alone with the lawyer, Mia finally allowed herself a moment to breathe. The vineyard. It was hers now. Hers to protect, to manage, to figure out. She didn't understand why Victor had made this choice, but she knew one thing for certain. Her life had just taken a turn she could never have predicted. She stepped out of the mansion into the rain, the thick folder of legal documents clutched tightly in her hands. The storm had eased, but Mia's thoughts swirled like a hurricane. What had she ever done to earn Victor's trust? And what would Liam do next? As she climbed into her car and glanced back at the mansion, a flicker of determination sparked in her chest. For years, the Walkers had treated her like she was nothing. But today, she had proven that she was so much more. What came next would be her choice, not theirs. Mia barely slept that night, her mind racing with questions she couldn't answer. Why had Victor left her the vineyard? What was his reasoning? The man had barely spoken to her during her marriage to Liam, always keeping his distance like he did with everyone. And yet, he'd trusted her of all people, with the most valuable piece of the Walker family's legacy. By morning, Mia's curiosity overpowered her confusion. She had to see it for herself. The vineyard wasn't just any property. It was legendary, the crown jewel of the Walker Empire and one of the most prestigious estates in the country. She remembered visiting it once, during a family holiday early in her marriage. Back then, the Walkers had treated her like a guest at best and an outsider at worst. They'd assigned her menial tasks while they sipped wine and lounged in luxury. But now, the vineyard belonged to her. As she drove her battered Honda down the long tree-lined driveway, she couldn't help but feel like an imposter. The car, its muffler rattling, seemed hilariously out of place against the backdrop of the sprawling estate. On either side, endless rows of grapevines stretched into the horizon, their leaves glistening with morning dew. A grand house rose at the center of the property, its stone facade weathered but stately. When Mia stepped out of the car, she was immediately greeted by a tall, rugged man with salt and pepper hair. He approached with cautious curiosity, his boots crunching on the gravel. You must be Mia, he said, extending a hand. I'm Henry, the vineyard manager. Mia shook his hand, her grip firm despite the nervous energy bubbling inside her. It's nice to meet you, Henry. Well, I guess this is mine now. Henry smiled faintly, though his eyes studied her carefully. It is. And if I may, Mr. Walker spoke very highly of you before he passed. He didn't share much, but he always said you had a good heart. Better than most of his family. Mia blinked, caught off guard. Victor had noticed her? For years, she'd felt invisible in the Walker family, dismissed as nothing more than Liam's unworthy wife. Yet somehow, Victor had seen her in a way no one else had. I didn't realize he thought that, Mia said, her voice quieter now. Henry nodded, gesturing toward the house. There's something else you should see. He left instructions for me to pass it along once you arrived. Inside the grand house, Henry led her to a cozy study lined with bookshelves. The scent of aged wood and leather filled the air. On the desk sat a small stack of envelopes, each addressed to her in Victor's distinctive handwriting. These arrived shortly before he passed, Henry explained. He asked me to hold on to them until you took ownership. Mia's hands trembled as she picked up the first envelope. The paper was thick, expensive, and the handwriting elegant but slightly shaky. Slowly, she unfolded the letter, her heart pounding as she began to read. Dear Mia, if you're reading this, it means I've passed, and you've been dragged back into the chaos of the Walker family. For that, I'm sorry. But there's something you need to know. I left you the vineyard for a reason, because I believe in you. You were kind and loyal in ways my son never deserved. When Liam betrayed you, it broke something in me. I saw too much of myself in him. Selfish, arrogant, blind to what truly matters. Mia's vision blurred with tears as she continued reading. The vineyard was always meant to be a legacy of integrity, something rooted in hard work and honesty. I couldn't trust Liam, or anyone else in this family, to protect that legacy. But you have the strength and character to make it thrive. I hope this gift gives you the stability and peace you deserve. Mia set the letter down, her emotions a whirlwind of gratitude, disbelief, and sadness. Victor had seen her. He'd understood the pain Liam had caused and wanted to give her something that no one could take away. She spent hours reading through the rest of the letters, each one revealing more about Victor's regrets as a father and his admiration for her. By the time she finished, her resolve was stronger than ever. This wasn't just an inheritance, it was a second chance. A chance to build something meaningful, not just for herself but for the legacy Victor had entrusted to her. But as she stood in the vineyard study, gazing out at the endless rows of grapevines, one thought nagged at her. Liam wouldn't let this go. The vineyard was more than just land to the Walkers. It was their pride, their status. And Mia had no doubt that Liam would do whatever it took to get it back. Her grip on the letter tightened. Let him try, she thought. She wasn't the same woman he had left behind. Not anymore. 2 weeks passed, and Mia immersed herself in the whirlwind of taking over the vineyard. Days began at sunrise and often stretched late into the night as she pored over financial records, legal documents, and notes Victor had left behind. Henry, the vineyard manager, was her guide through the intricate world of winemaking, patiently explaining the nuances of the business. The workers were initially skeptical of her. To them, she was an outsider stepping into an empire they'd been part of for years. But Mia didn't come in pretending to know everything. She asked questions, listened carefully, and spent hours walking the fields, learning every corner of the estate. Slowly, the workers began to warm to her. They saw her sincerity, her determination to honor Victor's legacy. But just as Mia started to find her footing, the storm she'd been anticipating arrived, and it had Liam's name written all over it. The first sign came in the form of a letter. A thick, official-looking envelope bearing the emblem of a high-profile law firm. The message inside was exactly what she'd expected. Liam was contesting the will. The second sign came days later, when Liam showed up unannounced at the vineyard. Mia was in the study, sorting through more of Victor's papers, when she heard the heavy thud of footsteps echoing down the hallway. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. His voice carried through the open doorway, sharp and dripping with arrogance. This is ridiculous, Mia. We need to talk. Liam strode into the room as if he still owned it, his suit pristine, his expression a mask of righteous indignation. But Mia saw through it. His anger wasn't just about losing the vineyard, it was about losing control. What do you want, Liam? She asked, her tone calm but firm. This place belongs to me, he snapped, ignoring her question. My father had no right to leave it to you. You don't know the first thing about running a vineyard. Mia set down the papers she was holding and turned to face him. Your father had every right to decide what to do with his estate. He chose me. That's something you're just going to have to live with. Liam's jaw clenched, his composure slipping. Be reasonable, Mia. Sell it to me. You'll make a profit, save yourself the stress, and we can end this whole thing peacefully. A sharp laugh escaped her before she could stop it. Peacefully? You mean the way you and your family left me with nothing? The way you humiliated me, made sure I couldn't even fight back in court? No. Liam. I'm not selling. And you can't bully me into changing my mind. Liam's eyes narrowed, his voice dropping to a dangerous edge. You don't know what you're doing. This place will fall apart under your watch. You'll ruin everything my father built. Mia stepped closer, her confidence growing with every word. Funny, because your father didn't think so. He trusted me, not you. He saw something in me that he didn't see in his own son. That must burn, doesn't it, Liam? For a moment, he looked as though he might explode. But instead, he spun on his heel, storming out of the study. As the sound of his car's engine roared down the driveway, Mia let out a shaky breath, her hands trembling slightly. She had stood up to Liam, something she'd never thought possible during their marriage. And for the first time in years, she felt truly free. But the battle wasn't over. The summons to court arrived a few days later. Liam was pulling out all the stops, bringing in a team of high-powered lawyers to argue that Victor had been coerced, manipulated into changing his will. Mia, on the other hand, had one lawyer. Walter Hayes. An older man with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor, Walter had been Victor's trusted attorney for years. He was the one who had delivered the news of Mia's inheritance, and he'd assured her that he'd stand by her through whatever came next. Don't let his theatrics get to you, Walter said as they prepared for the first court hearing. Victor knew exactly what he was doing. And we have the proof to back it up. The courtroom was a circus. Liam's lawyers painted Mia as a manipulative opportunist, claiming she'd taken advantage of Victor in his final years. They paraded witnesses, distant relatives and former employees, who gave damning testimony about Mia's supposed intentions. Mia sat silently through it all, her hands clenched in her lap. It was like reliving her marriage all over again, the same accusations, the same attempts to tear her down. But when Walter stood to speak, the entire tone of the courtroom shifted. Your Honor, he began, his voice steady and commanding. This case is built entirely on conjecture and character assassination. My client's integrity, and the intentions of the late Mr. Walker, are clearly documented. Walter presented the letters Victor had written to Mia, each one outlining his reasoning for leaving her the vineyard. As the judge read through them, the courtroom fell silent. In his final argument, Walter delivered a blow that shattered Liam's case. Victor Walker did not leave this vineyard to my client on a whim. He chose her because she exemplifies the values he wanted to preserve: integrity, kindness, and resilience. Qualities, I might add, that are glaringly absent in the plaintiff. Liam's face turned scarlet, his composure crumbling under the weight of the evidence. The judge ruled in Mia's favor, upholding the validity of the will. As Mia walked out of the courtroom that day, a wave of relief washed over her. She had won. The vineyard was hers, not just legally, but symbolically. It was proof that she wasn't the weak, insignificant woman Liam had once treated her as. This wasn't just about an inheritance anymore. It was about reclaiming her power, her voice, and her future. Months passed, and the vineyard began to flourish under Mia's leadership. At first, the challenges came at her from every direction. Financial complexities, supply chain issues, even the subtle doubts from the workers who weren't sure if she could handle the pressure. But every setback became an opportunity for Mia to prove herself. She spent hours walking the fields with Henry, learning the intricacies of soil, weather, and the delicate art of cultivating the perfect grapes. Late nights were spent poring over Victor's meticulously kept records, trying to piece together his vision for the vineyard. Slowly but surely, Mia began to find her rhythm. One of her first big decisions was to implement sustainable farming practices. An idea that Henry had floated years ago but one that Liam had dismissed as too costly. To Mia, it wasn't just about cutting costs or increasing profits. It was about building something that would last, something Victor would have been proud of. Her efforts didn't go unnoticed. Within months, The vineyard gained attention for its innovative methods and its focus on quality over quantity. The workers, once skeptical, now looked to Mia with respect. She wasn't just their boss, she was part of their team. But just as she began to feel a sense of peace, an all-too-familiar storm cloud appeared on the horizon: Liam. It started with whispers in town, rumors that he was planning another legal move to try and regain control of the vineyard. Then one morning, Mia found herself staring down a tabloid headline that read, "Scorned ex-husband fights to reclaim family legacy." The accompanying article painted Liam as a victim, a man wronged by a manipulative ex-wife who had stolen his rightful inheritance. The story was a blatant attempt to sway public opinion, and Mia could see Liam's fingerprints all over it. But she refused to be dragged into his games. Her refusal only fueled Liam's desperation. He arrived at the vineyard one afternoon, unannounced, his car kicking up dust as he sped down the driveway. Mia was in the middle of a meeting with distributors when one of the workers came running to tell her Liam was there. She excused herself, walking out to the front steps where Liam was pacing like a caged animal. "You have some nerve showing up here," Mia said, crossing her arms. "This isn't over, Mia," Liam snapped, his voice low and threatening. "You might have won in court, but don't think for a second that this place is yours. You don't belong here." Mia didn't flinch. "You lost, Liam. It's over. You need to accept that and move on." Liam's expression twisted into a bitter sneer. "You're just a schoolteacher playing dress-up. This vineyard is too big for you, too complicated. It's only a matter of time before you screw it all up. And when you do, I'll be here to pick up the pieces." Mia took a step closer, her voice calm but cutting. "Funny, isn't it? Your father didn't think so. He chose me because he knew I wouldn't ruin his legacy. He trusted me. Something he never did with you." For a moment, Liam's mask slipped, and she saw the hurt and anger underneath. He turned away, muttering something under his breath, before getting back in his car and speeding off. That encounter solidified something for Mia. She wasn't just fighting for the vineyard anymore. She was fighting for herself, for the life she deserved. Weeks later, the vineyard held its first public event under Mia's leadership, a community harvest festival. The fields were alive with activity, families wandering through the rows of grapevines, sipping wine, and enjoying the crisp autumn air. It was a celebration of everything the vineyard represented: hard work, community, and resilience. As Mia walked through the crowd, she overheard snippets of conversations. People talking about how much the vineyard had changed, how it finally felt like a place for everyone, not just the elite. Toward the end of the event, Mia found herself standing near the edge of the vineyard, where a plaque had been installed in Victor's honor. It read, "In memory of Victor Walker, a legacy of integrity and resilience." Mia traced the words with her fingers, a bittersweet smile playing on her lips. Victor had given her more than an inheritance. He'd given her a purpose, a chance to build something lasting. As the sun set over the vineyard, painting the fields in shades of gold and amber, Mia felt something she hadn't felt in years: peace. This wasn't just a victory over Liam or the Walkers. This was her home now, her future. And no one could take it from her. The story of Mia's unlikely triumph began to spread far beyond the vineyard. What started as whispers in the local community soon caught the attention of a prominent lifestyle magazine. One day, Mia received a call that would change everything. A reporter wanted to interview her. "We've heard about your story," the reporter said, her voice warm and intrigued. "From the divorce to the inheritance to the way you've turned the vineyard into a success. It's inspiring. People want to know how you did it." Mia hesitated. She wasn't one to seek attention, and the idea of laying her life bare in a glossy feature made her stomach twist. But as she thought about it, she realized something. This wasn't just her story anymore. It was Victor's, the vineyard's, and a testament to resilience. "All right," Mia finally said. "Let's do it." The interview was scheduled for a crisp autumn morning. The vineyard was at its most beautiful, bathed in the golden hues of harvest season. The photographer insisted on capturing Mia in the fields, standing among the vines with the grand estate in the background. "You look strong," the photographer said as she snapped shot after shot. "Confident. Like someone who's taken on the world and won." The feature was published a month later, with Mia's photo gracing the cover. The headline read, "From Betrayal to Brilliance: How One Woman Turned Heartbreak into a Thriving Legacy." The article was a deep dive into Mia's life, from her modest beginnings to the devastation of her divorce, and finally to her unlikely rise as the owner of one of the most prestigious vineyards in the country. It included excerpts from Victor's letters, his words painting a vivid picture of why he had chosen Mia to carry on his legacy. The piece quickly went viral. Readers across the country connected with her journey, her determination, and her refusal to let betrayal define her. Comments flooded in. "Mia is proof that you can rise above anything. This story gave me chills. What an incredible woman. Liam deserves every ounce of karma that's coming his way." Of course, not everyone was thrilled. Liam, furious over the way the article painted him, became the target of public ridicule. For years, he had cultivated an image of charm and success, but now that mask was crumbling. Online forums and gossip columns tore into him, dubbing him the ex who lost it all. The fallout didn't stop there. Chloe, his glamorous second wife, packed her bags and left, taking what little remained of his dwindling fortune. Rumors swirled that she'd been planning her exit for months, but didn't want to face the public humiliation of being tied to him any longer. For Mia, it was poetic justice, but she didn't dwell on it. Her focus remained on the vineyard and the life she was building. The magazine feature brought a surge of attention to the vineyard, and business boomed. Orders poured in from across the country, and Mia expanded the team to meet the demand. Yet through it all, she stayed grounded. The vineyard wasn't about fame or fortune, it was about honor. Victor's letters were her constant reminder of what truly mattered: the workers who toiled in the fields, the community that gathered to celebrate the harvest, and the legacy of integrity that she was determined to uphold. One evening, as Mia sat on the porch of the vineyard's main house, she noticed an envelope tucked into one of Victor's old journals. It had gone unnoticed until now. Her hands trembled as she opened it, the familiar weight of Victor's words already pulling at her heart. "Dear Mia, if you're reading this, it means you've embraced the vineyard and made it your own. I have no doubt you've faced challenges, but I hope you've also found joy and fulfillment in this place. You deserved so much better than what my son gave you, and I regret not stepping in sooner. Strength isn't loud or boastful. It's quiet, steady, like the roots of these vines that weather storms and endure. I hope this vineyard becomes a sanctuary for you, as it was for me. And remember, success isn't measured in profits or awards. It's measured in the lives you touch, the community you build, and the legacy you leave behind." Victor's words stayed with Mia long after she folded the letter. She wiped away a tear, realizing that this wasn't just a gift, it was a calling. The next morning, Mia walked the fields with Henry, planning the next harvest and discussing new ideas. The workers greeted her with warm smiles, their trust in her now unwavering. "I think Victor would have been proud of what we're building here," Henry said as they stood at the edge of the vineyard, looking out over the rows of thriving grapevines. Mia nodded, her heart full. "I hope so. But more than that, I hope he knew how much this meant to me. He gave me more than a vineyard. He gave me a chance to start over. And she wasn't going to waste it." Years later, the vineyard had become a true reflection of Mia's vision. A thriving, welcoming sanctuary that celebrated not just fine wine but community, resilience, and the power of second chances. What had once been an exclusive estate where only the wealthy felt at home was now a place for everyone. The annual Harvest Festival had grown into one of the most anticipated events of the season. Families from nearby towns, loyal customers, and curious newcomers flocked to the vineyard to experience its magic. Rows of grapevines stretched endlessly under the autumn sun, their golden and ruby leaves rustling gently in the breeze. Food trucks lined the pathways, offering fresh-baked bread, artisanal cheeses, and of course, glasses of the vineyard's finest wine. Mia moved through the crowd, greeting familiar faces and soaking in the joy that filled the air. Children laughed as they ran through the fields, their parents sipping wine and enjoying the crisp autumn afternoon. Couples strolled hand in hand, and workers who had once been hesitant to trust Mia now stood proudly at her side, sharing stories about the vineyard's transformation. As the festival reached its peak, Mia found herself drawn to the edge of the vineyard, where a special plaque had been installed years earlier. It bore a simple but powerful inscription. In memory of Victor Walker, a legacy of integrity and resilience. Mia traced the words with her fingertips, her heart full of gratitude. This vineyard wasn't just a business. It was a symbol of everything she'd overcome, a place where she'd rebuilt herself from the ashes of betrayal. Thinking about him? Henry's familiar voice broke her reverie. She turned to see him standing nearby, his hands tucked into the pockets of his work jacket. The years had added more silver to his hair, but his sharp, knowing eyes remained the same. Always, Mia replied with a small smile. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for him. Henry nodded thoughtfully. He saw something in you that the rest of them couldn't, or wouldn't. He trusted you to carry on what he started. And I'd say you've done more than just carry it on. You've made it yours. Mia looked back at the vineyard, watching as workers loaded freshly harvested grapes onto trucks and guests snapped photos of the breathtaking scenery. Victor's words from his final letter echoed in her mind. Success isn't measured in profits or awards. It's measured in the lives you touch, the community you build, and the legacy you leave behind. The vineyard had become all of that and more. It wasn't just a place for wine, it was a gathering point for stories, memories, and hope. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a golden glow over the fields, Mia felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The journey hadn't been easy, but every hardship, every tear, and every victory had led her here. She walked back toward the heart of the festival, stopping to watch a family laugh together as they sampled wine and cheese. A little girl with curls spilling out from under a sun hat pointed at Mia, whispering something to her mother. The woman turned, smiling warmly. You're Mia, aren't you? The owner. Mia nodded, returning the smile. That's me. I just wanted to say thank you, the woman said, her voice sincere. This place, it's special. It feels like home. Mia's throat tightened as she fought back tears. Thank you. That means more than you know. As the festival wound down and the crowd began to thin, Mia stood on the balcony of the main house, gazing out over the rolling hills. The vineyard was alive with the hum of life and progress, a testament to everything she'd built. For so many years, she'd felt invisible, cast aside, underestimated, and dismissed. But now she stood tall, rooted in a legacy that was hers to nurture and grow. The vineyard wasn't just a second chance. It was her proof that even in the face of betrayal, a person could rise, stronger and more resilient than ever. And as the stars began to dot the sky, Mia whispered a quiet thank you to Victor, her silent partner in this incredible journey. She was exactly where she was meant to be. The vineyard's success continued to grow, but with it came new challenges and unexpected surprises. As Mia expanded her reach, her name became synonymous with resilience and vision. Media outlets called her a trailblazer, a woman who had turned the impossible into a thriving legacy. One day, as Mia walked through the vineyard inspecting the latest harvest, her phone buzzed in her pocket. The number was unfamiliar, but something compelled her to answer. Hello, this is Mia, she said, her voice steady despite her curiosity. Mia Anderson? The voice on the other end was warm but professional. My name is Rachel Carter. I'm a journalist for Profiles of Power. Mia frowned slightly, recognizing the name of the high-profile publication. It was a magazine that featured stories of people who had overcome extraordinary odds or achieved groundbreaking success. I've been following your journey, Rachel continued. The vineyard, the court battle, the reinvention, it's remarkable. I'd love to write a feature about you. Mia hesitated. She had grown used to the occasional reporter asking for an interview, but this felt different. Profiles of Power was a major platform, one that would put her story in front of a global audience. I'll think about it, Mia said cautiously. Rachel chuckled. I get it. You're protective of your story. But I think this could inspire so many people who feel like they've been counted out. If you're open to it, let's meet, no pressure. After a few days of mulling it over, Mia agreed. The meeting took place at the vineyard, with Rachel arriving on a crisp fall morning. She was sharp, empathetic, and asked questions that cut right to the heart of Mia's journey. What was the hardest part of all this? Rachel asked as they sat on the veranda overlooking the fields. Mia thought for a moment before answering. Learning to believe in myself again. When Liam left, he didn't just take my home or my security. He made me doubt my own worth. I had to rebuild that from scratch. This vineyard, everything I've done here, has been about proving to myself that I'm stronger than I ever thought. The interview was raw and honest, and Rachel left promising to send Mia a draft before publication. Weeks later, the feature hit the stands, and it was more powerful than Mia could have imagined. The headline read, "From Forgotten to Fearless. How Mia Anderson Built a Legacy from the Ashes of Betrayal." The story recounted Mia's life, not just as a victim of Liam's betrayal, but as a woman who had fought back and won. It highlighted her kindness, resilience, and the deep bond she'd formed with the vineyard workers and the local community. The article included stunning photos of Mia in the vineyard, surrounded by the rows of thriving grapevines, and excerpts from Victor's letters, which moved readers to tears. The response was overwhelming. Emails flooded in from people around the world. "Your story gave me the courage to leave my toxic marriage. Thank you for sharing it. I didn't think I could start over at 40, but you've inspired me to try. This vineyard isn't just about wine, it's about hope. I can't wait to visit someday." Even the vineyard's sales skyrocketed. Bottles of Mia's signature blends sold out within days, and distributors clamored to carry her wines. It was clear that her story had struck a chord far beyond the world of winemaking. But not everyone was celebrating. Liam, now living a shadow of his former life, was furious. The article painted him as the villain, a man whose greed and arrogance had cost him everything. Publicly, he was mocked. Privately, he was drowning in regret. Even Chloe, his glamorous second wife, had left him months earlier, taking the last scraps of his dignity and wealth. For Mia, though, this wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about Liam anymore. It was about the countless people who had reached out, inspired by her story to take control of their own lives. Late one evening, Mia sat in the study, reviewing orders and plans for the next season. As she sifted through documents, she came across a worn envelope tucked into one of Victor's old journals. She hadn't noticed it before, and her breath caught as she recognized Victor's handwriting. She opened it carefully, the paper crackling in her hands, and began to read. "Dear Mia, if you're reading this, it means you've achieved more than I could have ever imagined. I trusted you with the vineyard because I believed in your strength, your kindness, and your ability to create something lasting. But beyond the vineyard, I hope you found something even more important: peace. I didn't always do the right thing as a father or as a man. But giving this vineyard to you was the best decision I ever made. You've shown me what true resilience looks like. Thank you for reminding me that redemption is always possible." Victor's words stayed with Mia long after she folded the letter. He hadn't just given her an inheritance, he'd given her a purpose. As she stepped outside onto the balcony, the stars stretched endlessly above the vineyard. The night air carried the faint scent of grapes, soil, and possibility. For the first time in her life, Mia felt completely free, not defined by her past, but empowered by it. She smiled, thinking of all the people who had written to her, inspired by her journey. If her story could help even one person find their own strength, it had all been worth it. The years continued to pass, and the vineyard flourished beyond even Mia's wildest dreams. It wasn't just a business anymore, it was a symbol, a beacon of hope for people who had faced their own struggles and needed proof that second chances were real. Every year, the Harvest Festival became bigger, attracting visitors from all over the country. Families would spend their weekends among the vines, sipping wine, laughing together, and feeling the magic of a place built on resilience and heart. One crisp autumn morning, Mia stood on the balcony of the vineyard's main house, her gaze sweeping over the endless rows of vines. The hills were bathed in golden sunlight, and workers moved through the fields, their laughter carrying on the breeze. She felt a deep sense of gratitude, a peace that came from knowing she had rebuilt not only her life but also the lives of so many others. The workers, once skeptical of her leadership, now saw her as one of their own. Henry, her steadfast manager and partner in the vineyard's transformation, had become like family. Together, they had implemented innovative techniques, built partnerships, and expanded the vineyard's reach to international markets. But more than the awards or the business success, Mia cherished the community that had blossomed around the vineyard. People came not just for the wine but for the connection, the sense that this was a place where everyone belonged. One day, as Mia walked through the fields, she noticed a young couple standing near the plaque dedicated to Victor. They held hands, their faces soft with emotion. She approached quietly, not wanting to disturb them, but the woman turned and smiled. "Are you Mia?" she asked, her voice filled with awe. Mia nodded, returning the smile. "That's me." The woman stepped closer, her voice trembling with emotion. "I just wanted to say thank you. My husband and I read your story a few years ago when we were going through a really rough time. It inspired us to keep going, to start over. And now, here we are, happier than we've ever been. This vineyard, it's more than just beautiful. It's a reminder of what's possible." Mia felt her throat tighten as she tried to find the words. "Thank you," she said softly. "That means more than you know." As the couple walked away, Mia stood by the plaque, reading the words etched into the bronze. "In memory of Victor Walker, a legacy of integrity and resilience." Victor's legacy had become hers, and now it was touching lives in ways neither of them could have imagined. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of amber and violet, Mia sat on the porch of the main house. The vineyard stretched out before her, alive with the hum of nature and the quiet rhythm of the night. She opened the final journal Victor had left behind, one she had saved for a moment like this. Tucked inside was one last envelope, its edges worn with time. She opened it carefully, unfolding the letter with trembling hands. "Dear Mia, if you're reading this, you've done it. You've built something extraordinary, not just for yourself, but for everyone who steps foot on this land. You've honored this vineyard in a way I never could. For that, I thank you. I gave you the vineyard because I saw your strength, your heart, and your ability to turn pain into purpose. But what you've done with it, that's all you. You've made it better than I ever imagined. I hope you know how proud I am of you. Remember, this vineyard isn't just about wine or success. It's about the lives it touches, the hope it inspires. And you've done that, Mia. You've created something lasting. Something that matters. With gratitude. Victor." Tears welled in Mia's eyes as she folded the letter and held it close to her heart. Victor had given her more than an inheritance. He'd given her a second chance, a purpose, and a place to belong. As the stars filled the sky, Mia felt the weight of her journey, every hardship, every victory, every moment of doubt, and realized it had all led her here. She stood, taking one last look at the vineyard, its rows stretching into the horizon. The lights from the festival twinkled in the distance, and the laughter of families echoed softly through the air. This wasn't just a vineyard. It was a legacy, a place of healing, growth, and hope. And for Mia, it was home.